Hi, Stephanie Gruhn here. Welcome to Ventilation Nation and Integra podcast. This episode, we are going to focus on the introduction of our CE services. Our special guest today is Mr. Larry Zanko. He is the National Vice President of the CE Services Division. And thank you so much for joining us today, Larry. I really appreciate your time and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Stephanie. Glad to be
Mhm.
here.
Mhm. And just so you know, I found this Integra CE pen that I brought in your honor so I could keep myself focused on CE and all the things that you do. So anyway, Integra is it's the largest national testing, adjusting, and balance firm in the United States. And your division was acquired back in, I think, April of 2024.
Yep.
Correct. And, I just wanted to get a little introduction on some of the basics of CE services and what it means. So, why don't we get started with this? Let's start with, what is CE services? What does CE mean?
CE stands for controlled environment.
Hmm.
So it's a fancy phrase that somebody made
Hmm.
up.
Okay.
That doesn't help you much though, right? So a
No, it
controlled
doesn't.
environment could be anything.
Hmm.
Our houses are really controlled environments, but we mostly just control the temperature and the humidity. The controlled environment that the Integra CE team works in or other places like drug manufacturing facilities. So besides controlling the temperature and the humidity, they control other things such as the pressure in the room. So if you're in a sterile area, that room's a higher pressure, so none of the dirt from the surrounding rooms can get in. They control the particle count in the room using filters. They control the microbial level in the room, all sorts of things just to make
Hey,
sure
who's
that
they? Who controls it?
who's they? Well, it's we work at universities, we work at pharmaceutical companies, so a lot of times they have a facility staff that's in charge of these kind of things. There's alarms when something's wrong, and when something's wrong, that's when people like us get called in to fix it.
Okay, so it's not like little green people, little
No,
evil
no,
people
no, I've
go.
never seen any green people.
There's no extraterrestrial activity happening here. Okay, so you operate in a controlled environment, and what specifically is your group doing in that controlled environment?
So we are testing the controlled environment to make sure that it is operating correctly. So pharmaceutical production is the thing that most people can relate to because at one time or another we've all received a vaccine or taken a drug, and those drugs are made in very special sterile areas, and our team does the testing to make sure those areas are operating properly so they don't contaminate the product that's being made inside of them.
Interesting. Okay. So if a pharmacy and a hospital ask for your services, you send in a technician and they are specifically testing the equipment?
So we can either test the equipment or
Mhm.
the rooms themselves. So when we test
Okay.
the rooms, we'd be testing things such as the HEPA filters. That's a high efficiency filter that is
Okay.
found in the ceilings of these types of facilities.
Mhm.
It's your vacuum cleaner sometimes has a HEPA filter, but these are much more rugged HEPA filters. The pass fail criteria for one of these filters is actually 0.01%. So
Oh,
even the
wow.
tiniest leak and the filter fails for these kind of applications. So our guys might look like almost like Ghostbusters when they walk in. They've got a big cart and they've got about 30 or $40,000 of fancy equipment to do all this testing. So when we check these filters for leaks, like I said, 0.01%, you're not going to see that by looking at the filter to see if there's a leak. So we actually inject an aerosol gas upstream of the filter, and we use an instrument called a photometer, which is
Mhm.
you could think of it like a laser. And
Okay.
we're using a laser. We're scanning every surface of that filter with that laser, just seeing if any of that aerosol we put on the other side can come through. So that's how we would test the filters. You know, the other things I talked about, like the particle counts, we have a very special instrument that can actually count particles as small as a tenth of a micron. So
Wow.
we run that for a few minutes,
Mhm.
and it gives us a report, and it tells us how many particles of various sizes are in the air. So these are very expensive custom instruments that we do to
Mhm.
take these measurements.
So the HEPA filters are up on the ceiling. They're like with where you would find your ceiling lighting and all those things, right? It's kinda like that's where they live in these rooms?
So instead of a ceiling tile, you're right.
Mm,
Every
mhm.
tile in some applications would actually be a filter. So some of these pharmaceutical production areas have hundreds of filters that we have to go in. We have to test one by one every single surface to make sure they're not leaking.
Wow. So that's like the core kinda bread and butter service for what you do
For clean rooms, it is. It's
for clean
checking
room?
those filters. It's making sure the air doesn't have any particles or microbials in it. I mentioned before that we check the pressure, but we also do testing on equipment like biological safety cabinets.
Mm,
Those are very special pieces of equipment that you can manipulate hazardous things inside of them, and it will protect the user from whatever might be inside the cabinet. And it also the cabinet can protect what's in there from being contaminated from the outside. So that cabinet has a HEPA filter in there, just like the clean room.
okay.
So we do very similar
Mhm.
testing, whether it's a piece of equipment with a HEPA filter or it's a clean room with HEPA filters in the ceiling.
Okay. So are you in, like, schools? Do you do a lot of
No, not
Mhm,
so much. There was a little bit talk of schools back during COVID when even schools were buying HEPA filtered pieces of equipment to try to
mhm,
to keep the classroom safe. But
mhm,
for us, it's universities is about
mhm,
as close as we come to a school, and then beyond that, it's pharmaceutical and med device would be our most common types of
okay.
applications.
Yeah, you would think with a bunch of kids, little small elementary children running around with colds all the time, they'd maybe try to improve their air quality a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
So, I was chatting a couple of weeks ago with one of my colleagues in the healthcare space, and they were talking about the increase of hospital acquired infections. And there's, kind of it sounds like there's a blossoming need for more of these services in the hospitals because maybe I shouldn't, this is the information he gave me and I've never fact checked it. I just want to say that. But he said that 90% of hospital acquired infections come from the air.
I believe it,
Mhm.
and the scary thing is most of the operating rooms still don't have HEPA filters in them. So
Wow.
the air in an operating room is a lot dirtier than the air in a facility where they're making pharmaceutical drugs, for example. And just within the last 5 or 10 years, they're starting to install HEPA filter banks in the operating rooms to purify the air. But the problem is there aren't any standards yet,
Mm,
in terms of how they need to be tested. So how often do they need to be tested? So, for example, in the pharmaceutical world, every 6 or 12 months, there's a regulation that says you must do a test. Those regulations are still being drafted for the healthcare industry, and I anticipate in the next 5 or 10 years, you're gonna see people like our Integra CE team doing similar testing in hospitals. It's just not quite there yet.
what's the standard? Is it ISO 6?
There's a bunch from 'em. Hopefully, I can get the numbers correct.
Okay.
ISO 14644
Okay.
is one in the US that applies to a lot of, drug manufacturing.
Mhm,
In the European Union, there's something called Annex 1 that
mhm,
describes the steps that you need to take, for manufacturing pharmaceuticals, and then there's other standards if we're talking about compounding drugs in a hospital pharmacy. There's such standards as USP, or that stands
mhm.
for United States Pharmacopoeia, 797 or 800. So depending on the application, there's all sorts of standards that you need to comply with, and that's really where Integra comes in because these standards are really difficult to keep up with. If you're a customer, they're worried about making their product, keeping their teams happy, and they count on us to know the standards and keep them compliant.
So you're able to help guide our customers on what they need to meet and help give them some guidance on how to meet the requirements or at least
We
tell them
we
what they need
are
to do?
we are there.
Mhm.
There's a lot of places, unfortunately, where the people just really don't have time to become experts in the standards, and they count on us. And that's a big part of our advantage because, the last time I checked, there isn't a college where you can get a degree in controlled
Mhm,
environments. I've never heard of
mhm,
that. So it's hard to find people that know this stuff, and really it's through decades, and I'm not
mhm,
exaggerating. Some of the companies under our umbrella were founded in the '70s or earlier. It was over decades that we developed a training curriculum to these standards, and we teach our people about these standards. So that allows them to come in and be the expert and help our
mhm.
customers, and that's a big part of the value that we provide.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. I've been with Integra for about 16 months now, and every day I learn something new, and I think I've learned about 10 new things today. So thank you for that. We probably should move on for the sake of time here. I could talk about this for all day. We talked about what does your business solve and why is it important today? I think we kind of covered that one. So maybe we'll skip that question. I think we hit that one pretty hard. Um, how would you describe your core services or products to someone unfamiliar with your industry? And I know we kind of touched on that, but somebody really unfamiliar that has zero idea of what you do, how would you describe your services or products to someone unfamiliar? Just maybe take 30 seconds on that one.
Yeah, that can be a tough one. When people
Mhm,
ask me that question, I'm just
mhm,
tempted to say like we make copiers or something really
mhm.
simple because like where do you start with
Mhm,
CE? And the approach I take, and it really doesn't do justice to all the services that we provide, but just trying to keep it to 30 seconds, like you said. I say we perform testing to ensure that the areas where they produce pharmaceutical drugs, such as vaccines, are going to be pure so that the drugs aren't contaminated. And when I say that, it's something that most people never think of. When you take a drug, I never think like, "Oh, I hope this one isn't contaminated." So we just take it for granted that the drugs that we're gonna get here that we purchase wherever or our doctor prescribes to us are gonna be pure, but there's a lot of effort that goes in behind the scenes to make sure that happens. And when I say that, people are like, "Oh, I never really thought about that," but it makes sense that somebody would be checking these areas to make sure that they're not gonna be producing contaminated products.
right. No, absolutely. And I know the podcast, one of the podcasts we aired recently was with Ralph Jones. He works for you. He's a district service manager, and as you know, of course,
Great guy, great
and
guy.
yeah, great guy. And he actually kind of described that process where we were testing the equipment in the pharmacy so that the drugs wouldn't be contaminated. It was very so if anybody listening today, if you want to go back and listen to that one, that one was titled Why Our Work Matters, and it was a pretty special episode. So and Ralph was part of Larry's team. So thank you for that. Okay, so what is your ideal customer and what do they typically struggle with before finding you?
Say our ideal customer is somebody that puts a lot of value in having their operation run the way it should run as much as possible. So uptime is the fast way that we say that.
Mhm.
So customers that can't afford things to be screwed up is the best kind of customer for us.
The customer who can't afford to have things screwed up, which would be a hospital.
A hospital, I keep talking about these pharmaceutical
Mhm.
companies, and we all know the prices of some of these drugs. Heaven
Right.
forbid, some of the cancer ones, and we hear about those costing tens of thousands of dollars per week. Well, that's revenue to the companies that we serve, and it's not an exaggeration to say that they could be making tens of millions of dollars per day. That's the value of the product that they're producing each and every day. So if there's even one day where they can't produce because they had some sort of issue with their environment, that's a really big deal. Somebody's
Mhm.
going to get a phone call if production's down and they're
Right.
missing out on tens of millions of dollars. So the ones that whose applications are critical and they can't afford any downtime are the ones that really appreciate what we can do for them.
Wow. Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. That's great. Um, can you can you share a story where your service made a real impact?
Probably a lot of them.
Mhm.
The first one that comes to mind, and I keep talking about these vaccines, but it's a big part of what we do, Stephanie. And this particular vaccine, I know it's a little bit controversial these days, but I mean, you can substitute. this vaccine for anyone that you want. But I'm thinking back to 2020 when there was a big rush to get the COVID vaccine onto the
Mhm.
market.
Yep.
And we were called into more than one location where they were ready to produce this vaccine that a lot of people desperately wanted back then, but they needed the area to be certified before they could start production. So we are the ones that came in and we checked all the filters, we sampled the air and issued the report and said, "Yes, your area is operating the way it should be. You can go ahead and produce products." So that was for COVID, which got a lot of headlines, but there's all sorts of drugs where we perform a very similar service for. You just don't hear about it in the national news all the time.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
It
It
is,
is powerful. Mhm.
my background is chemical engineering, and I kinda joke with people, Stephanie, that I probably could have, worked for a fertilizer company and helped make the greenest grass anyone's ever seen, and that would be really cool, but the the importance of the work that we do is just a lot more satisfying to me on a lot of levels. Like, I truly feel that the work that the team does every day makes a real difference out in the world, and that's what makes it easier to get up every day and come to work.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I know one of the, titles we talked about with this podcast was it "Where Air Meets Insight," and when we were developing this podcast series and trying to put names to it, it's funny, I didn't understand what that really meant until we've gone through this the series and the topics of the podcast, just talking to all these individuals, and every time I have a discussion or have a interview with a podcast guest, the impact of what we do and how significant it is, it just rises. It just raises every single time. So that's awesome. You have been an amazing guest, Larry, and I have a crystal clear understanding of Integra CE services and what CE means and what you can do. So let me leave you this final question. What is the best way for someone to connect with your team? Somebody that
Well,
wants your services.
sure. When in doubt, you can always come to me. I'll get
Okay.
you in contact with the right person. So that's one option if you can't remember. But our national sales manager on the CE side is Justin Hopkins.
Mhm.
Justin is somebody you can reach out to, or Joe Engel is our national vice president for sales throughout all of Integra. Or you can just go to the website. There's
Mhm.
a place where you can enter a lead and it gets channeled to the right person. So lots of ways to get in touch with us.
Larry, great job. Amazing, amazing guest. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this and be part of Integra and all the special things that this company's doing. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
You have a great day. Peace out.
You too. Bye, Steph.